First day at Pinkston, but rather than coming on the bus, her mother brought her.
Right.
Why?
We didn't know where to catch the bus at.
Are you nervous about Betty's being here?
Yes.
Why?
Well, it's always the first time.
What about you, Betty? Are you nervous?
Uh-huh.
Have you had a chance to talk to any of the kids yet?
No.
What are you nervous
Oh,
about?
no. Nothing. I've been in a new school that I don't even know.
Do you think
Well, it might be all right. I think the same thing too.
You think it's gonna be okay?
I don't.
Why not?
I don't. Because the first day that I went out there, well, we had a scramble, but it was okay.
You expecting a scramble today?
Well, not so far, but I think I'll make it. A little, I hope.
Does it bother you to be riding a bus?
No.
You think most of the kids are going to go to school today, or are they going to stay home and wait and see what happens?
I think most of them will go today. It'll be all right. Just long.
The Los Angeles Unified School District reported today that the white student population is almost 20,000 under last year's total. The source of the problem? White flight. Terry Drinkwater reports. Mandatory busing was ordered by the courts and heralded as the only way to integrate Los Angeles schools. But now, a month after it began in earnest, educators, parents, and teachers generally agree it has failed. Not because of the demonstrations that have, on a few occasions, stopped the buses from rolling, not because of the protests, not because of violence between the races. There hasn't been any. Busing has failed because the number of white students needed to make it work have quietly dropped out of the public schools. 1/4 of the whites scheduled for the rides do not show up. A few of the boycotting whites have been kept home, parents hiring tutors. Others are now enrolled in storefront schools, but most have been squeezed into existing parochial and private schools. So, what's left of the public school system? Crowded classrooms in some parts of the city, teachers who can speak no Spanish trying to teach students who can speak no English. Minorities still isolated in the ghetto schools, which were never included in the busing plan because there weren't enough whites to go around. And there are other prospects if the exodus of whites continues.
I think the students that have left are gone. I'm very depressed. We look as if we might even be a school under 300 students next year. It's very, very possible. And in which case, there might be no more Warner Avenue School.
Close it?
It could very well be closed.
In the midst of it all, the school superintendent requested and got permission for early retirement. Meanwhile, Governor Brown has ordered a state investigation of how the Los Angeles Board spends its money. And educators in and beyond the district forecast slumping student test scores, fearing that in all the confusion, the teaching and learning process has fallen by the wayside. Terry Drinkwater, CBS News, Los Angeles.
With the whole thing, House of Pain, the funky Irish styles,
Cause I'm a white Irish man with a funk soul. It's what it is, sure. It's what it is. It's what it is, sure. It's what it is.
We just try to do what we know best, and we try to come with, what's real, and that's it. I mean, whether it's Irish, or this or that, whatever. It's just, that's just a part of us, you know. Our whole image is not built. It's just what it is. It's what we are, you know.
Irish pride is what I got a lot of those disputes.
You know, we're Irish and that's part of the group, you know, and people want to play on it, which is fine with me, because like I said, as long as it's truth, I got no beef with it. Because like I said, as long as it's truth, I got no beef with it.
How do I describe the sound of House of Pain? Yeah, it's like drunken street fighting rhymes.
I won't ever slack up, monkey better back up. Try and play a role and you're the whole crew will act up.
If you speak to anybody who's ever been to jail, that's what they call jail. Jail is the House of Pain. And my personal view on what the House of Pain is to me is this is my head. This is my House of Pain. It's where everything goes on with me. Life is pain, and anybody who tells you different is selling something. And it's like no pain, no gain. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you want something, and it's gonna be something that's worth something, you're gonna feel it.
I had to work around the clock, so it was easier for her to ship me back east every summer to my aunt and uncle, who were apt to watch out. And for me, that's going back to an era where there's no internet and cell phone. So I'm going back to New York with OP, Lightning Bolt, Vans. I mean, Vans was a regional shoe. You didn't get that unless you had a skateboard, or there wasn't even real skateboard magazines, because it was after the skateboard rush. BMX was the thing. If you had a BMX mag, you maybe order Van Doren's from LA, but you couldn't get them in the mall. So people knew. Older kids were like, "Yo, you're from LA, right?" And I'm like, "Yo, how did you know?" I'm like, "Come on, man. I'm draped in it. I'm listening to Oingo Boingo and Fishbone. Nobody even knows what that is in New York." And then I'm coming back with Curtis Blow, Run DMC, Fat Laces, Pumas. So it was a cultural exchange.
Yeah.
Why I tell you that is that I was a b-boy from day one. I grew up in the roller rinks. I listened to all kinds of my mother's Motown records, funk records, Gap Band, and Parliament. All that stuff was always something I loved. Cameo, all of it.
Yeah, man.
And then I'm into hip hop early. And in hip hop, one thing you cannot be, especially back then, it's changed, was a drug addict. The hood is like, you can't be a snitch, you can't be a drug addict. You can sell drugs, but to do drugs is like a forbidden rule. I mean, think of it, who's talking, Curtis Blow's the only one talking about white lines don't do it. I mean, you could say what you want about hip hop even back then, but it was a drug-free environment. And that's not to say a lot of dudes were cloaking it. They were. And knowing what I know now, reading the biographies I read, and knowing what I know, a lot of people were getting high behind closed doors. But it wasn't acceptable where it was in rock, where rockers were known to get high and do their thing. In hip-hop, it was like, you either selling it or you using it. You can't, you're either all in or all out. So I stayed away from it. I always had a healthy fear of drugs. I was like, this is terrible. And then one night, someone offered me what we were talking about earlier, about Willie Nelson calls speed roadie coke. It's like, I don't do roadie coke, roadie coke. And it was methamphetamines. And in the 90s, that was prevalent in Los Angeles. And I thought, shit, what do I got to lose? I'm already going through it. I would have done anything not to feel the way I was feeling. And so I tried meth, and for the first time I feel like I did when I had that first drink, that it's just like, why did I wait so long to do this? This is the drug for me.
Were the other guys in House of Pain doing that too, or is it?
Never.
Really?
Never. No. We never did drugs as a band. I started to dabble at the end of House of Pain. I was also in an outlaw motorcycle club at the time, so methamphetamines was also prevalent in that situation, which I won't talk about on this because just get me in some, hot water. But and maybe Eric was hearing whispers, and I even went to rehab through House of Pain at the end because of, my coke use. I just found it and overnight just went and dove in head first. We're talking about them almost 30 years later. That's incredible that, that those are still things. But at the time, when these things are happening in real time, it's like, dude, this is terrible for everybody. This is not good. And it turns out to be just fine. And rest in peace, MCA.
MCA, yeah, that was...
Ricky Powell, rest in peace. He was on that tour as well. And life is fleeting and life is short. And good, bad, or indifferent, man. To just be sitting here at this point of it, it's all, it's all bonus rounds, and for me, I'm grateful for all of it, even the bad stuff, because it's changed me and it's made me who I am today. And for the first time, and I'm not just being, cheeky or whatever, I can honestly say that I like the guy. When I look in the mirror, I like what I see, and when I go to bed at night, I sleep with a clear conscience, because I don't, my side of the street is clean, and I'm not the guy I was, and it's not to say I didn't do the things that I've done in the past, but I'm not that guy anymore. And so that's for me a 180. And so all of this now is like novel. It's almost like I'm watching a movie 20 years ago, and you watched that movie from a different, and we were remembering scenes, and I'm like, is that my movie? I was in that? Like, because it doesn't seem sometimes like a movie. It feels like a movie we watched together, not my life.
Yeah, but you lived it.
We lived it. And so to get back to going out on tours with bands that we both love and adore, you got to keep in mind, even in early 90s, there was like an unspoken like ban on rap shows, because a lot of people would bring African American communities into predominantly white communities, and that was at a time, even in the 90s, was still like we don't want that kind of trouble. And then there was a lot of it seemed like every big show was Run DMC and Together Forever. Somebody got shot in the parking lot, or Mike Tyson knocked some dude out in another, there was always reports, somebody got shot, somebody got stabbed. So city council was like, you're not bringing any of that to town. So when we came out, we kind of we qualified as the hip hop group, but we cloaked it as like, hey, we love this grunge thing too. We love rock. We're open-minded to that, but you're not really seeing a hip-hop show. We're not booking that as we're kind of just like alternative.
Yeah.
And it was a way,
Did you guys go on the Warped Tour, by the way? I was just thinking about it.
That was after. That was after the fact, for sure.
Because they had. Well, I say that because they had so many different acts.
This is kind of what encouraged that kind of Judgment Night soundtrack.
Can I say something real fast? I forgot to talk about this with DJ Lethal, and it killed me. But this is one of my all-time favorite soundtracks. Most underrated. It's like the birth before nu metal. You have Slayer with Body Count, with Faith No More.
And not just rhyming on somebody else's track. So in the past, when Run DMC rhymed on Aerosmith's track, these were already hits. It was a hit track that he was rhyming on. This is the first time two bands were creating together unique music in that. And that's Ricky Rackman's sister, Karen Rackman,
Ricky
part of that.
I didn't even talk about that. That's amazing.
So Ricky would tell you a lot about it. But also, I think Be Real and Everlast also were the catalyst for saying, like, we're not trying to rhyme. We're not going to rhyme on nobody else's, like, track that's already, you know, like we're not gonna we're gonna make new material, or we're not gonna do this. And so that was like
This was before I don't know if it's before Rage Against the Machine, but this was what I heard first before any of this. And having you guys did a song with Helmet, right?
Yeah.
That was amazing. The opening track's probably my favorite song on there, but
me too.
Just rhyming with all these,
it's one of those house-based songs I listen to still, and I still love it. You know?
I love it too, man. What you think about Judgment Night? That's one of my favorite. The movie.
I've never seen the movie. Everlast is in the movie. Yeah, Everlast. He's in the movie, and that's also where he meets Peter Green, which is also a friend that we go way back. So there's a lot of Everlast is.
The fact that this is not talked about more often, like. I just don't.
I mean, between heads know, you know what I mean? Like, cats are around that, if they're like deep cut, you're like a deep cut dude. You're like a liner note junkie, what I like.
I love it.
Because when I worked at the record store too, I was always like, who produced that? You know, what studio did they master that at? It was information nobody else cared about. But I always wanted to know, like, the details.
Dude, I was so nervous. When I was a kid, man, I used to, like, with cassette tapes, I'd lay them all out and sit there and go through them all, man. That was just my favorite thing.
Well, I was a product manager at the record store, so they paid me to do that.
Really?
To, like, categorize them, price them, queue them in, put them out on the floor, and I loved it. I worked at a record store at a time where hip-hop they had no section. Hip-hop would go in the R&B section, and me for that stupid stuff. But that's what I did. So when I met Eric, it was like, yo, bro, come get some of this. Like, I'll put you onto this, I'll get you this. And we started celebrating Ever.
Yeah.
Which is, who in high school or like right after high school has a record with Ice-T? I mean, I was so impressed by that fact. Something to you, and if you're not equipped for it, and I was not equipped for it, I have a very. My education is I'm a smart guy, but the education is I'm immature. All of these things, like I was stunted in that way because I never,
And you're getting all this money. I mean, you're just putting it in your. You're.
And in my mind, I was going to buy everything that I needed to buy that I didn't get as the kid.
Yeah.
If you got a Lacoste, I was getting the La Tiger. If you were getting a Redline bike, I was getting a Raleigh Rampart. If you got a Roadrunner, I'm getting a Satellite. And I'm always getting the knockoff brand. And so when I finally made money, I'm like, those days are over. So now I'm overspending and overcompensating for what I felt like. Again, it's all outside stuff.
Yeah.
And not for nothing, like the world, when you're a kid, you get pitched that these are the things that fix you.
Okay, around this time, I have so many questions, but around this time, the tours you went on, Cypress Hill, I mean, that's amazing. Korn, all these people.
Yeah, well, Cypress, so Everlast and me, we lived in the same neighborhood per se, in the same general vicinity. This is going back to the early, mid 80s. And there were a few hip hop venues. They were like old roller rinks, so the Sherman Square roller rink would have a hip hop event where like Bobby Jimmy and the Critters or UTFO would play, like early hip hop acts. It was like almost like a vaudeville thing where like defunct old venues that are no longer being used for anything, and now the neighborhood has changed, they will book a hip-hop show because, and so if you're in that show and you're a white guy and you look around the room, you're going to see maybe two other white guys. And that was like, oh, okay, I recognize dude. It's like, and you're up there, you're like, what's up? Everybody's in there like, yo. And I see Eric, so I know he's real, and I know he's like one of the few handful of white B-boys. And so we ran in different circles, but they'd always, I'd see him at the mall, we worked at the same spot actually once. And it wasn't until years later, he'd already put a record out with Ice-T, which is, who in high school or like right after high school has a record with Ice-T? I mean, I was so impressed by that fact that somebody I knew had a record with Ice-T, and I was a fan of the record. And then I guess, they depart and they go different ways. The record comes out, it doesn't really do much. Eric's looking for whatever the next thing is, and at the time I'm doing a lot of credit card theft, and I won't get into but I'll give you an example of what we used to do. I had an ability to have an ID made the California driver's license were like thin, and you could remake them. And I had a guy who could come to your house, come to my apartment, pull down a screen. It was just a gray screen.
Yeah.
Take a photo of me, and then in 2 hours they would come back with whatever information I would ask for on that card. I would come to somebody like you, Scott, and say, Scott, I'm giving you $500. You're giving me all 3 of your credit cards. And you're like, the fuck I am.
Yeah.
I'm like, Scott, you're gonna call those in stolen. They're no good to you anymore. I'm giving you $500, which is the equivalent of like $1,200, $1,500 in today's money. And you're like, dude, I can't get busted or nothing. I'm like, they're dead cards. You're like, you're right. So you'd call them in, you'd sell those to me, and I'd take that photo, and then I would put your information, your name. So now I have a set of 3 cards. I could reprogram the chips, and there was no chips. They would reprogram the stripe. I couldn't do that, but somebody else could do that.
Yeah, it'd be harder today.
Yes. No, anything is doable. I could reprogram those strips, and now...
We could do a whole YouTube channel just on this stuff.
I can show you how, well, it's 80s technology or early 90s. And then I would go out, and I would go into establishments, and I would steal, I guess. I would go up, and I'd buy $250 down comforters. At the time, that's like $500. You know, I'm buying halogen lamps, and what I didn't do so I didn't get arrested, I never bought Air Jordans, I never bought pull-out stereos.